Sometimes it's not shouting that breaks a family. It's silence, the kind that lingers between two people who once shared everything. I still remember the morning when my son stopped calling me Mama. He said Mother instead. It sounded so distant, so polite, like a word strangers use. That small change felt heavier than I can explain. That was the day I knew something inside our bond had shifted. My name is Margaret. I'm 72 years old, living in a quiet town in Ohio. I used to believe I understood love, especially a mother's love. I gave everything to my only son, Daniel. He was my pride, my joy, my reason to smile when life wasn't easy. I lost my husband when Daniel was 16. It was sudden, a heart attack on a rainy night. We had no savings, no backup plan. Just the two of us facing a world that suddenly felt too big. I worked 2 jobs after that. Mornings at the bakery, evenings cleaning offices. Daniel studied hard. I remember him promising once, "Mom, one day you'll never have to work again." Those words kept me going for years. When he graduated, I cried, not because I was sad, but because I could finally breathe. My son had made it. He became an engineer, got a good job, and for the first time we had a little house of our own. Life finally started to feel gentle. Years passed, and Daniel started talking about a girl he met at work. Her name was Emily. He spoke of her often, her kindness, her laughter, her way of making him feel understood. I was happy. Every mother dreams of seeing her child loved and cared for. But something inside me felt uneasy. Not jealousy, not fear, just a strange distance. Daniel started visiting less. When he did, his phone never stopped buzzing. Emily this, Emily that. He laughed more when he talked about her than when he talked to me. I told myself this was normal. Love changes priorities. I didn't want to sound like one of those lonely mothers who complain. The first time I met Emily was at my house. She came with a bunch of flowers and a bright smile. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Walker," she said. Her voice was soft, polite, but there was something rehearsed about it. I smiled back and said, "Call me Margaret, dear." She didn't. Emily was beautiful, well-spoken, well-dressed, confident. I admired that. But as I watched her walk through my kitchen, touching things, commenting on how cozy it was, I felt a quiet kind of judgment in her tone. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Like she was measuring everything, comparing it to something grander. Still, I tried to like her. Daniel loved her, and that was enough for me. When he proposed, I helped him choose the ring. I even offered to pay for part of the wedding, though I didn't have much. But I wanted to be part of his happiness. The wedding day came, and I sat there watching my boy, my sweet, awkward Daniel, standing tall in his suit, looking like a man I barely recognized. When Emily walked down the aisle, he couldn't take his eyes off her. It was beautiful, but as the ceremony ended, I realized something small yet painful. No one had asked me to give a speech. I had prepared one, written neatly on paper, but I kept it folded in my purse all night. Later that evening, while everyone danced, I sat quietly near the back. I overheard Emily's mother talking to a guest. "Oh, Daniel is lucky," she said proudly. "He's practically part of our family now. We'll make sure he never feels alone again." Her words were innocent on the surface, but they sank into me like a cold needle. When Daniel came to check on me, he asked, "Having fun, Mother?" Not Mama, just Mother. I nodded and said yes. I didn't tell him that my heart felt like it was shrinking inside my chest. After the wedding, Daniel and Emily moved to a city about 2 hours away. I told myself they needed space, a life of their own, but weeks turned into months. Calls grew shorter. Visits stopped altogether. When I called, Emily often answered saying, "Oh, Daniel's busy right now. He'll call you later." Sometimes he did. Sometimes he didn't. One afternoon, about a year later, I decided to visit them unannounced. I baked his favorite apple pie, packed it carefully, and took the bus. When I reached their apartment, I felt nervous, like a guest in my own child's life. I knocked. Emily opened the door. Her smile froze for a second before she said, "Oh, Mrs. Walker, what a surprise." I held up the pie. "I thought I'd visit. I made Daniel's favorite." She stepped aside but didn't look pleased. The house was spotless, decorated perfectly. White curtains, modern furniture, framed photos of them smiling, but not a single picture of me. Daniel came out from his study, surprised but polite. "Mom, you should have called," he said. I laughed awkwardly and said, "I wanted it to be a surprise." He hugged me, but it was brief, cold. We sat for tea, and Emily asked questions that felt more like interviews. "How's your house? Are you managing alone?" Her tone wasn't caring. It was curious, almost detached. After an hour, she said, "We actually have dinner plans with my parents tonight, so we should start getting ready." I understood. I didn't want to be a burden. I said I'd leave soon. Daniel didn't insist I stay. He didn't even ask how I'd get back home. On the bus ride back, I looked out the window and told myself not to cry. I had done my job as a mother. I raised him, loved him, gave him everything. Maybe this was just life. Children grow. They find new homes, new families. But deep down, I felt replaced. Months passed again. Daniel called less often. When he did, his voice carried that tone of politeness children use when they talk to an elderly neighbor. I stopped baking for him. I stopped waiting by the phone. I just carried on quietly. Then came the real blow. One winter morning, I received a letter from the bank. Daniel's name had been removed as co-owner from the small savings account we once shared when he was younger. It wasn't about money. It was the meaning behind it. That account was something I had opened for him, something that connected us. When I called to ask, he said softly, "Mom, Emily's mother thinks it's better to manage finances separately now. It's just more organized." Emily's mother. Not Emily, not him, her mother. That night, I sat in my small kitchen with the lights off, listening to rain tapping the window. I realized I wasn't just losing my son. I was being erased from his world, piece by piece. It's strange how quietly heartbreak happens at this age. There are no arguments, no slammed doors, just slow distance, polite smiles, and the kind of silence that follows you everywhere. I started writing in my old notebook again, not for anyone to read, just to pour out what I couldn't say. I wrote about Daniel, about the little boy who once ran to me after school, showing me his report card with pride. I wrote about his wedding, his cold hugs, and the moment I realized my place in his life had been taken over by another mother. That was the start of everything, the quiet beginning of a storm I didn't see coming. I thought the worst was over, but life still had more lessons to teach me, ones that would test my patience, my pride, and my love for the son I thought I knew. The days after Daniel's wedding felt strange. I would wake up, make 2 cups of tea out of habit, and then realize there was no one to share it with. The chair across from mine stayed empty. The house had never been so quiet. Daniel and his new wife, Anna, moved into a townhouse about 30 minutes away. At first, I thought it was close enough. I could visit whenever I missed him, I told myself. But I soon learned that distance isn't measured in miles. It's measured in how often someone remembers to call. Weeks passed before I heard from him. When he finally did call, his voice sounded rushed. "Mama, sorry. Things have been so busy. Anna's mom has been helping us set up the house. You should come visit soon." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "Of course, darling," I said. "Just tell me when." He promised he'd call back with a day. He didn't, so one Sunday morning, after sitting alone with my tea again, I decided to visit them myself. I baked Daniel's favorite lemon pound cake, packed it carefully, and took the bus to their new neighborhood. The house was lovely, small, neat, and full of young energy. I stood at the door, holding my cake, feeling like a child about to meet her teacher. Anna opened the door. Her smile froze for a second, before she said, "Oh, Mrs. Walker, what a surprise." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I had always told her to call me Margaret, but she never did. It was always Mrs. Walker. Formal, distant, cold. "Daniel's just gone to the store," she said, stepping aside so I could come in. I entered carefully, like I was walking into someone else's life. Everything looked perfect. The curtains, the new furniture, the smell of expensive candles. There were pictures on the wall, but none of me, not even the one from his graduation that I loved. Anna's mother came out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "Oh, Margaret," she said, in that polite tone people use when they don't mean it. I offered her the cake. Thought I'd bring something sweet for the weekend. She looked at it for a second before replying. "Oh, that's kind. Anna just baked cookies, but we'll save this for later." Later never came. They never cut that cake. When Daniel returned, he hugged me quickly, like someone completing an old habit. We sat together for a few minutes, but it was mostly Anna and her mother talking about their new furniture, their plans, their style. I listened, smiled, nodded, but inside, I felt invisible. When I finally stood to leave, Daniel walked me to the door. "Everything okay, Mama?" he asked. I wanted to say, "No, it's not. I miss you. I feel forgotten." But I just managed a small smile. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Take care of yourself." He kissed my cheek and went back inside. I stood there for a moment, watching through the window as they laughed together. The 3 of them, without me. That night I sat in my small living room, the TV murmuring softly in the background. I looked at the clock. It was almost 9. Daniel used to call me every night at this time when he lived with me. Now my phone stayed silent. A few weeks later, I received a call, not from Daniel, but from Anna's mother. She said, "Margaret, I hope you don't mind, but Daniel and Anna will be spending Christmas with us this year. It's just easier since my daughter's family will be here." I froze. Christmas. The one day I looked forward to all year. The day Daniel and I used to decorate our little tree, watch old movies, and eat roast chicken together. "Oh," I said, voice low. "Of course. That makes sense." After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The house felt colder than usual. That winter, I didn't put up the Christmas tree. There was no point. On Christmas morning, I made myself tea and turned on the radio. They were playing cheerful carols. I tried humming along, but my voice cracked. Outside, I could hear children laughing, families opening presents. And in that moment, I realized something painful. Love doesn't disappear in one day. It fades quietly, in moments like these, when you realize someone you raised no longer looks for you in the crowd. Daniel called me that evening. "Mama, Merry Christmas," he said brightly. I could hear laughter in the background, clinking glasses, music. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I replied, my voice thin. "Sorry we couldn't come this year," he said. "We'll visit soon, I promise." "It's all right," I told him, forcing cheer into my voice. "You sound happy, and that's what matters. Love you, Mama," he said quickly before hanging up. I stared at my phone for a long time after that. 3 words. "Love you, Mama." But they felt thinner now, like they were losing their weight. The months that followed were much the same. Fewer calls, fewer visits. I learned to fill my days with small routines, tending the garden, feeding the birds, watching old shows. But deep down, I was waiting for the day Daniel would come home and say, "Mama, I missed you." That day never came. Instead, one spring afternoon I saw them both in town, Daniel and Anna, walking hand in hand, laughing. I waved from across the street, but he didn't see me. Or maybe he did, and pretended not to. I'll never know. That night, I took out an old photo album, pictures of Daniel as a boy, covered in mud after soccer practice, his first school uniform, his smile at graduation. I ran my fingers over his face in the photos, tears blurring my vision. I whispered, "Where did I lose you, my boy? I thought I had done everything right. I worked hard, sacrificed, gave him love, warmth, a home. But maybe love alone isn't enough to hold someone close forever. Maybe, sometimes they have to lose you to realize what they had." As I closed the album, I told myself one thing. I would stop waiting. If he wanted distance, I would give him that. Not out of anger, but out of dignity. Because even a mother's heart deserves peace. Still, as I turned off the light, I couldn't help but whisper into the darkness, "Good night." My son. The months after Christmas passed slowly. The snow melted, the flowers returned, and life in the town went on as if nothing had changed. But inside my little house, everything felt quieter than before. I used to hear the sound of Daniel's laughter in the kitchen. Now there was only the sound of the old clock ticking on the wall. Every morning I sat by the window with my cup of tea. I watched the neighbors walking their dogs, children waiting for the school bus, and the mailman who always nodded politely. Life kept moving. But I felt stuck in the same moment. The moment I realized my son had built a life where I didn't belong. Sometimes I would pick up the phone and look at his number. My thumb would hover over the call button. Then I'd put the phone down again. I told myself I didn't want to bother him, but deep down I was afraid he wouldn't pick up. One afternoon I finally did call. It rang 5 times before Anna answered. Her voice was polite, almost too polite. "Oh, Mrs. Walker," she said. "Daniel's at work. Is everything okay?" Everything. Such a small word for such a big emptiness. "Yes, everything's fine," I said softly. "Just wanted to say hello." "That's nice," she said, her tone gentle but distant. "I'll tell him you called." She didn't ask how I was. She didn't even ask if I wanted to leave a message. Just like that, the call ended, and I sat there listening to the silence again. A few weeks later, I received a card in the mail. It was from Daniel and Anna. A printed card, not handwritten. "Happy Mother's Day," it said, with a picture of pink roses on the front. Inside there was a short message. "With love, Daniel and Anna." No note, no signature in his handwriting. I ran my fingers over the paper. Once upon a time, Daniel would draw me little hearts and write, "Love you, Mom." Now the card felt cold, like it was made by a stranger. That evening I went to the attic. I opened an old box filled with things from when Daniel was a boy. His first drawing, a small paper crown from his 5th birthday, a photo of him holding a chocolate cake. He was smiling at me in that picture. I touched his face and whispered, "Do you still remember, sweetheart?" The tears came quietly, like rain that refuses to stop. I sat there for a long time, surrounded by memories that smelled of dust and love. I told myself that he was busy, that maybe he'd visit when things calmed down. Mothers always find excuses for their children. It's what we do. But weeks turned into months, and he didn't come. Not even a phone call, not even a text. Then one day I saw them in town. Daniel and Anna were walking down Main Street, holding hands, carrying shopping bags. I almost didn't recognize him at first. He looked different, more polished, more someone else. I started to wave, but then I saw her mother walking beside them. They looked so comfortable together, like a small family. I froze. Something inside me broke quietly. I stepped back into the bakery doorway before they could see me. I watched them laughing, sharing a small joke. Daniel leaned in to whisper something to his mother-in-law, and she laughed, touching his arm like she'd known him all her life. I turned away before the tears could fall. I walked home slowly, pretending I didn't see anything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how easily he had replaced me, how natural it seemed for him to call another woman Mom. Maybe he didn't use that word, but the way he looked at her, I knew. It was the same way he used to look at me when he was small and scared, when I'd hold him close and say, "It's okay, sweetheart. Mama's here." I thought about calling him again, but I didn't. I didn't want to hear his voice filled with guilt. I didn't want to hear the lie that he'd been meaning to visit, because if he wanted to, he would have. Instead, I decided to focus on my garden. The roses had started to bloom again. I spent mornings trimming them, watering the soil and talking to them softly. They were the only ones who listened. Then one day I got an unexpected visit. It was Mrs. Jenkins, my neighbor from 2 houses down. She brought me cookies and sat with me on the porch. She said she'd seen Daniel and Anna at the farmer's market. "They look so happy together," she said kindly. "You must be proud." I smiled, though my chest ached. "Yes," I said. "I'm glad he's happy." She nodded, not noticing the way my hands trembled as I held my teacup. After she left, I sat there staring at the empty street. I realized something that night. Pride and heartbreak can live in the same heart. I was proud of the man my son had become, but I was heartbroken at the woman he no longer saw. A few months later, I heard from him. It was a voicemail. "Hey, Mom. Sorry, been busy. Hope you're doing well. Anna and I are thinking of taking a trip soon. Maybe we'll stop by. Maybe." Such a small word. Such a painful one. I replayed that message 5 times just to hear his voice. Then I saved it, as if saving it could keep him close. But he didn't call again after that. The trip never happened. That autumn, my health started to slip a little. The doctor said it was just age, that I needed rest. But I knew it wasn't my body that was tired. It was my heart. Sometimes I'd sit by the window, watch the leaves fall, and imagine Daniel as a boy again, running through them with laughter. I could still hear his voice echoing in my mind. "Mama, look at me." And I'd whisper back, "I see you, sweetheart." I always do. The seasons kept changing, but Daniel didn't come. Christmas passed again. Another quiet dinner, another untouched chair at the table. I lit a candle near his old photograph. Just to feel like he was there, I whispered, "Merry Christmas, my son." The candle flickered, and I let myself believe for a moment that he could hear me. But deep down, I knew some distances can't be crossed by phone calls or cards. Some silences grow roots so deep, they can't be pulled out. Still, every night before I went to bed, I looked at the small photo of him on my nightstand, the same one from when he was 8 years old, smiling with missing teeth. I'd touch the frame and say softly, "Good night, my son." Because even when love fades in the world outside, a mother's heart never stops saying good night. The winter that year felt colder than usual. Maybe it wasn't the weather. Maybe it was me. The house felt bigger, emptier, like every wall carried an echo of what used to be. One morning, as I was reading the newspaper, I noticed a small photo. Daniel's picture in the community section. "Local architect wins design award," it said. My heart swelled with pride. That was my boy. I wanted to call him right away, to tell him how proud I was. But then I stopped. If he wanted me to know, he would have told me himself. So I cut the picture out of the paper and placed it on the fridge. Every time I walked past it, I smiled, even if it hurt a little. Days passed quietly. I woke up early, made tea, watched the sun rise through the frosted glass, and talked to my plants. They were the only ones that seemed to listen without pity. Sometimes I'd bake cookies and bring them to the church on Sundays. People there were kind. They'd say things like, "You're always so cheerful, Margaret." I smiled back, but they didn't see the truth behind that smile. They didn't see the nights I cried myself to sleep because my phone never rang. Then one afternoon, the phone did ring. I almost dropped my cup rushing to answer it. "Mom?" Just hearing that word again made my eyes fill with tears. "Daniel, sweetheart, how are you?" He sounded cheerful. "We're good, Mom. Listen, I wanted to tell you something. Anna's pregnant." For a second, I couldn't speak. My heart jumped and then sank all at once. "Oh, Daniel, that's wonderful." He laughed softly. "Yeah, we're really excited. Anna's mom is staying with us to help out, you know. With the nursery and everything, of course. She was." I pressed my fingers against my lips, trying to hide the tremble in my voice. "That's lovely," I said. "You'll be a great father." He talked for a few more minutes about baby names, about how Anna had been feeling sick, and how busy work was. Then he said, "Anyway, I just wanted to share the news. We'll talk again soon, okay?" "Of course," I whispered. "I'm so happy for you, Daniel. After the call ended, I sat on the couch and let the tears fall. My first grandchild. And yet I wasn't part of it. I wasn't asked to help or even to visit. I was happy for them. But it felt like joy was standing on the other side of a locked door. Months passed, and one evening I got another call. It was a short one. "She's here, Mom. It's a girl." A girl. My first grandchild. My hands shook as I held the phone. "Oh, Daniel. Congratulations. What's her name?" "Emma," he said proudly. "She's perfect. You should see her, Mom." "I'd love to," I whispered. "When can I come?" There was a pause. A long one. Then Daniel said, Anna's still recovering, and her mom's here helping. Maybe in a few weeks once things calm down." I forced a smile he couldn't see. "Of course. Take your time." But those weeks never came. He sent photos instead. Beautiful ones. Emma wrapped in a pink blanket. Tiny fingers curled around his. Anna smiling. Her mother standing beside her, holding the baby proudly. I stared at those photos for hours. I printed one and put it in a small frame beside Daniel's picture on my nightstand. Then I whispered, "Hello, Emma. Grandma loves you already." Every night after that, I talked to her photo. I told her stories about her father when he was little. How he used to chase fireflies. How he once broke my favorite vase and blamed the cat. I told her how kind he used to be. I told her I hoped she would grow up to have that same heart. One day I decided to send them a small gift. I knitted a pink blanket and a pair of tiny socks. I packed them carefully with a note that said, "For my little Emma, with all my love, Grandma." 2 weeks later, the package came back, returned. The label said, "Address incomplete." But I knew that wasn't true. I had written it correctly. I sat on the porch holding that box, the wind brushing my face, and I felt something inside me quietly give up. Still, I couldn't stop loving them. You can't stop being a mother or a grandmother just because someone forgets you. Love doesn't have an off switch. One afternoon, while I was watering the garden, Mrs. Jenkins came by again. She said, "I saw Daniel's family at the park today. The baby's adorable." I smiled faintly. "I'm sure she is." Mrs. Jenkins hesitated, then added softly, "You should visit them sometime." "I will," I lied, "when the time's right." That night I sat in bed looking at the photo of Emma again. I whispered, "Happy first birthday, sweetheart," even though I knew she couldn't hear me. I imagined holding her, smelling that baby scent, feeling her tiny heartbeat against my chest. But imagination can only carry you so far. "One day," Daniel called again. "Hey, Mom, we're planning Emma's christening next month." My heart lifted. "Oh, Daniel, that's wonderful. I'd love to come." There was silence on the line. "Well, Anna's mom already made the arrangements, and, it's a small gathering. Just close family, close family." The words stung more than he knew. "I understand," I said quietly. He hesitated. "Maybe we can do something later, just the three of us." "Of course," I said again. I always said, "Of course." It was easier than letting my heart break in front of him. After that call, I sat on the porch till the stars came out. I realized something that night. Love isn't always returned. Sometimes it just sits inside you, quiet and heavy, waiting for a place to go. And even if no one sees it, it's still there, always. So I decided I would keep loving them, even from afar. I'd write letters I might never send, I'd talk to their photos. I'd light a candle for them every Sunday and pray that Emma would grow up surrounded by kindness, even if it wasn't mine. That became my ritual. Every Sunday morning I lit a candle, placed it by their pictures, and whispered, "Be happy, my loves." Then I'd sit in silence, watching the flame flicker, because sometimes that's all love can do. Just keep burning quietly, even when no one notices the light. Months passed after Emma's christening. I didn't hear from Daniel again for a long while. The house grew quieter than before, and sometimes I caught myself forgetting what his voice sounded like. I'd play old voicemails just to hear him say, "Hi, Mom." It wasn't much, but it kept me company. One afternoon, as I was sweeping the porch, the mailman stopped by. "Big envelope for you, Mrs. Walker," he said with a smile. It was from Daniel. My heart jumped. I hurried inside, sat at the kitchen table, and opened it carefully. Inside was an invitation, not handwritten, just a printed card. It read, "Emma's first birthday party, hosted by Anna and family." There was no personal note, no call before or after, just the invitation. Still, I smiled. It was something. Maybe this time would be different. I picked out a small gift, a soft teddy bear with a pink ribbon around its neck, and wrapped it neatly. I even bought a new blue dress to wear. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about seeing my granddaughter for the first time. When the day came, I took the early bus and carried the gift on my lap all the way there. My hands shook, not from age but from nerves. When I reached their neighborhood, I saw cars parked everywhere. The house looked full, alive. Laughter spilled out from the backyard. I walked to the door and rang the bell. A few seconds later, Anna's mother opened it. Her smile faded slightly when she saw me. "Oh, Mrs. Walker," she said, voice tight. "What a surprise." I smiled politely. "I got the invitation." "Yes, well, we weren't sure if you'd make it," she said. "It's quite a full house already." I nodded, pretending not to notice the discomfort in her tone. "I just wanted to drop off a little gift for Emma." Anna appeared behind her mother. She looked beautiful, tired but glowing. She forced a small smile. "Oh, hi, Mrs. Walker." "Hello, dear," I said softly. "Congratulations. She's a lovely little girl." Anna shifted awkwardly. "Thank you. We're just about to cut the cake in a few minutes." I hesitated, clutching the gift. I'd love to see her, just for a moment. Daniel appeared then, carrying the baby. My breath caught in my throat. She was beautiful. Soft curls, big eyes, and a smile that looked just like his when he was small. "Daniel," I whispered. He looked surprised. "Mom, you came!" He leaned over to kiss my cheek quickly. "You didn't have to come all this way." "I wanted to," I said. "I wanted to meet my granddaughter." Anna's mother said, "They're about to start the party, Daniel. Maybe we should head to the backyard." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, Mom, maybe you can come by later. Things are a bit busy right now." It felt like someone had gently closed a door right in front of me. I smiled through the sting. "Of course," I said. "I understand." I placed the gift on a small table near the door. "This is for Emma," I said softly. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." I turned to leave before anyone could see the tears in my eyes. As I walked away, I heard music start behind me, followed by laughter, the sound of a celebration I wasn't part of. The bus ride home felt longer that day. The teddy bear ribbon still floated in my mind. pink and bright, a reminder of everything I had missed. That evening, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The silence in the house felt thicker than ever. I whispered, "Happy birthday, Emma," to no one but the night. A week later, I received a text from Daniel. "Mom, sorry you came by. Things were crazy that day. Thanks for the gift." That was all. No photo, no call, just a message that read like a receipt. I typed back, "That's all right, darling. I understand." But the truth was I didn't. After that, I stopped expecting things. I didn't wait by the phone anymore. I didn't look at the mailbox hoping for cards or letters. I stopped knitting little socks that no one would wear. But love doesn't die just because you stop showing it. It just changes shape. So I started writing letters to Emma. Not to send, just to write. I bought a small notebook and filled it slowly. Each page had a little story about her father when he was young, how he once made me breakfast on Mother's Day and burned the toast, how he used to draw pictures of our family and always forgot to add himself. I wrote as if one day she'd find those pages and know I existed, know that someone loved her from afar. Sometimes I'd imagine her older, sitting with that notebook, tracing my words with her fingers and whispering, "Grandma." That thought alone was enough to keep me going. Life went on quietly. I grew used to the silence. I planted new flowers, joined a book club, and smiled more than I felt. People said I seemed peaceful. Maybe I was. Or maybe I had just learned to live with the ache. Then one evening, as I was closing the curtains, I saw a familiar car pull into my driveway. My heart skipped. Daniel stepped out. He looked tired, older. When I opened the door, he didn't speak at first. He just stood there, holding something wrapped in a pink blanket, Mom. He said softly, "Emma wanted to meet you." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I reached out and he placed her in my arms. She looked up at me with those same bright eyes. I smiled, tears running down my face. "Hello, my darling girl," I whispered. "I've been waiting for you," Emma giggled, tiny hands reaching for my necklace. Daniel smiled faintly. "She's been asking about you lately. I thought it was time." I looked at him through tears. "Thank you, Daniel." He nodded. "I should have done this sooner." That evening we sat together, me, Daniel, and Emma. As the sun went down, I told her stories, just like I had written in those letters. It felt like time had stopped, like everything broken had finally begun to heal. For the first time in years, my house felt full again. The weeks that followed were slow. The house was quiet, too quiet. I would sit by the window listening to the wind outside, waiting for the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. But it never came. The world outside kept moving. Children walked to school, mailmen passed by, and neighbors mowed their lawns, while my world had stopped somewhere between yesterday and memory. I found myself going through old photo albums more often. There were pictures of Daniel as a boy, his cheeks round and bright, always smiling for the camera. One picture stopped me for a long time. It was the day he built a birdhouse with his father. He was wearing that blue flannel shirt, the same one I'd kept folded in a drawer upstairs for all these years. I ran my hand across the photo, tracing his face with my finger. My heart ached, but it was a gentle ache, like missing someone you know will never come back, yet you still hope they might. One afternoon, I decided to clean the attic. Dust floated like snowflakes in the sunlight as I opened the old boxes stacked against the wall. Inside one of them was Daniel's baby blanket, soft, faded, and still carrying the faintest scent of him. I sat on the wooden floor, holding it close to my chest, and whispered, "You were my whole world, you know that?" The tears came without warning. They fell onto the fabric and darkened the little blue stars printed on it. I didn't wipe them away. I let them stay, as if my love could soak into the cloth once more. That night I couldn't sleep. The house seemed louder than usual. The ticking of the clock, the creak of the floorboards. Even the hum of the refrigerator felt alive. I got up and walked to the hallway where his room used to be. The door was half open, just the way he'd left it. I stepped inside and stood there in the dark. Everything was still. The desk, the shelf, the window. I could almost hear his voice calling, "Mom, I'm home." I closed my eyes and whispered back, "Welcome home, sweetheart." A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Daniel's wife. My hands trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was neat but distant. She thanked me for the gift I'd sent for their baby. A small knitted blanket I had made myself. Then she said they were moving to another state because of Daniel's job. I sat there reading that line again and again. Moving. Farther away. Another wall between us. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my drawer. For a moment I felt like a chapter of my life had been quietly closed, without asking me first. Spring came and went. The garden bloomed again. The lilacs, the roses, the little patch of daisies near the fence. I kept it all alive for him. Sometimes I'd talk to the flowers while watering them. "You remember Daniel, don't you?" I'd say softly. "He used to help me plant you." The wind would answer with a soft rustle, and I'd imagine it was him saying, "I remember, Mom." One Sunday morning the phone rang. My heart jumped the way it always did. It was Daniel. His voice was warm but tired. "Hi, Mom," he said. "How are you?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "I'm fine, sweetheart. How are you?" He talked about work, the new house, and the baby who was learning to crawl. I laughed at the little stories, even though part of me hurt knowing I wasn't there to see it all. Before hanging up, he said, "We'll visit soon, I promise." I nodded, though promises sometimes faded like echoes. "I'll be here," I said softly. "I always am." That night I sat in the living room holding the phone even after the call ended. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. I looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight. I thought of the time difference, of him tucking his child into bed while I sat alone in mine. There was love between us, yes, but distance too. A quiet kind of distance that words couldn't fill. As the days went on, I started to talk to my late husband more. Not out loud, just in my mind. I'd tell him about Daniel's new job, about the baby, about how I was trying to stay strong. Sometimes I could almost hear his reply, soft and calm. "You've done enough, Margaret. Let go a little." But I didn't know how. Letting go felt like losing him all over again. One evening the power went out during a storm. The house was swallowed in darkness except for the small candle I lit on the table. Rain tapped against the windows, and thunder rolled in the distance. I sat there listening, the candlelight flickering across the old photographs on the wall. For a strange moment I felt peaceful, the kind of peace that comes when you realize the worst has already happened. And somehow, you're still standing. When the lights came back on, I went to bed. But before turning off the lamp, I whispered a prayer. Not for myself, but for Daniel, his wife, and the baby. "Take care of them, Lord," I said. and if you can, let him remember me now and then." Then I closed my eyes. For the first time in a long while, I slept without dreams. The next morning, sunlight spilled gently through the curtains. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel cold. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the world wake up. The birds were singing again, their tiny voices filling the air. I took a slow sip and smiled to myself. Maybe peace doesn't come all at once. Maybe it comes in small moments like this. A warm mug, a soft breeze, a quiet morning that doesn't hurt. I started taking little walks around the neighborhood again. The lady next door, Mrs. Walker, sometimes waved from her porch. We weren't close, but her smile was kind. One day she said, "Haven't seen you in a while, Margaret. You doing okay?" I nodded and said, "Yes, I think I am." It was the truth, at least partly. Grief doesn't disappear. It just learns to live quietly inside you. I began volunteering at the local library once a week. It gave me a reason to leave the house to talk to people. The children who came for story hour reminded me of Daniel when he was little. Their laughter filled the room in a way that healed something deep inside me. I'd sit there, reading fairy tales, pretending for a moment that time hadn't moved on. Then one afternoon, I got another letter. The envelope had Daniel's handwriting. My heart fluttered. Inside was a short note and a photo. A picture of him holding his baby, both smiling at the camera. The baby had his eyes. "Her name is Emily," the letter said. "She's growing fast. We miss you, Mom." I pressed the photo to my chest and let out a quiet sob. It wasn't sadness this time. It was something softer. Hope, maybe. The kind of hope that says, you still matter. I framed that photo and placed it on the mantel beside the old family pictures. Every morning I'd stop and look at it before starting my day. I'd whisper, "Good morning, my loves." It became part of my routine. A gentle reminder that love doesn't vanish with distance. It stretches, changes shape, but it stays. As the seasons passed, I began to write again. Nothing special, just small notes in a journal. I wrote about my days, my memories, and the things I wished I could tell Daniel. Sometimes I even wrote letters to my husband, as if he were still listening. Maybe he was. The act of writing made the silence less lonely. It gave my thoughts a home. One quiet evening, the phone rang again. It was Daniel, his voice brighter this time. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said. "We'd love for you to visit. Emily keeps pointing at your photo when we talk about Grandma." I froze for a moment, the words sinking in like sunlight through water. "I'd love that," I whispered. "I really would." After the call, I sat in my chair for a long while, letting the warmth spread through me. It wasn't about being needed anymore. It was about being remembered, being loved, even from afar. Weeks later, I packed a small suitcase, just enough for a visit. I folded my clothes carefully, added a few gifts for the baby, and tucked in the old photo of Daniel with his father. Before leaving, I walked around the house one last time, touching the walls, the furniture, the little things that held our memories. "I'll be back," I said softly. "Don't worry." When I finally saw Daniel at the airport, my heart almost gave out. He looked older, wiser, but still my boy. He hugged me tightly, and for a moment all those years of distance vanished. His wife smiled, holding baby Emily in her arms. The baby looked at me with curious eyes, then reached out and touched my cheek. I laughed through tears. "Hello, sweetheart," I said. "I've waited so long to meet you." The visit went by too fast. We talked, cooked, laughed, like a family learning each other again. I read bedtime stories to Emily every night, and each time she'd ask, "Grandma, one more?" I'd smile and say, "Just one more, darling." Sometimes I caught Daniel watching me, quiet and thoughtful. Maybe he was remembering too. The years when I read to him just like this. When it was time to go, I didn't cry. Not this time. I knew I'd see them again. The goodbye was gentle, filled with gratitude instead of sorrow. As the plane took off, I looked out the window and whispered, "Thank you, God, for giving me this chance." Back home, the house didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like a place that had done its job. Raised a son, held a family, carried a lifetime of love. I sat by the window again with my tea, the sun setting softly behind the trees. I thought about all the things I'd lost and all the things I'd found. Forgiveness, peace, and a little piece of joy that I thought was gone forever. I closed my eyes and smiled. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Not forgetting, not moving on, but learning to live with love that never fades. And that night, before turning off the lamp, I whispered the same words I always did. "Good night, my son." But this time my heart was light, because somewhere out there I knew he was saying it back.